Colleagues, good morning. Let's start. So today we will discuss a very important theme, the problem of justification and efficacy and effectiveness of oversight activities of the state. So formally, oversight and monitoring was articulated today, but from the beginning, for every session, for every plenary session, oversight and monitoring have been touched upon anyway. So it started with the guillotine. Was it a surprise for us or not? But it actually is one of the main ideas of the forum, and at various sessions, representatives of the authorities or business people or public organizations touched upon this anyway over the forum. And what we want to discuss today is one of the most important integral elements of oversight and monitoring, why we need this function of the state at all, and what are the beneficiaries who participate in the process and what they expect. And according to the scheme of our panel today, we will have Vladimir Yuzhakov's keynote presentation. He will talk about he will present a very unique overview on the interest of citizens in the process. And then we will discuss it, and we will also talk about a couple of more aspects of this kind of activity. And without further ado, to have enough time and cover our full agenda, please, Vladimir Nikolaevich, the floor is yours. And I will introduce our participants of the panel, of the discussion. Vladimir Yuzhakov, Rector for the Center of Technologies of State Management of Applied Research, RANEPA, the host of our forum. It is very good that Mr. Litunovsky has joined us also, Deputy Head of the Oversight and Monitoring Department under the President of the Russian Federation. Mikhail Predilnikov is here in time, Deputy Head of Analytical Center under the government of the Russian Federation. Alexander Fyodorovich Bragin, our expert, long-standing expert, Director for Non-Commercial Fund Analytical Center Forum. Konstantin Dmitrievich Nikitin, Deputy Director, Department of the Ministry of Economic Development, Department for Control and Oversight, and a representative from the Moscow region, Kirill Grigoriev, Deputy Head of the Analytical Department of the main oversight unit of the city of Moscow. So the first row is experts, active participants of our discussion. We will introduce them one by one a bit later. And now let's move on to the keynote presentation. Vladimir, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Nadezhda Ivanovna, esteemed colleagues. I'm a bit nervous about talking on the results of our research that we carried out in RANEPA last year in such an audience today, an audience which is represented mostly by control, oversight, and monitoring representatives. First of all, Nadezhda Ivanovna has already articulated it, that we will present a unique overview on the issue. Our overview, our point of view, is not very unique, frankly speaking, but if we clarify the focus of our attention now, control and self-control, all activities cannot go without it. Any activity cannot go without it, and activities of the state, internal control is very important for it. But now we are going to talk not about any type of control, but control activities of the state aiming at protection of significant values, significant for the citizens. And this means all types of oversight and monitoring that are enlisted in the draft law, federal law on state and municipal control. And these values that should be monitored among the values are health and life protection and property protection, environment, architectural values, historical monuments, and so on. But if we think about this law, this draft law, there are not so many values like that. They there are just not more than 10 of them. And that's the control, oversight, and monitoring we mean. Oversight and monitoring done by the state aiming at protecting meaningful values, meaningful for the citizens, and they are protected by the law. That's why they are called protected by the law, values protected by the law. So protected against various types of risks. If we speak about this type of control, then our overview, point of view, is not very much unique. It goes hand in hand with the nature of the control. So there are three beneficiaries of this type of control: state, businesses, and citizens. And over the recent decade, it so happened that the main attention on improvement and strengthening control was aiming at protecting interests of the business. And the first law on oversight and monitoring was published in the format of protection against oversight and monitoring from the side of the state. And yesterday, if you remember, or even the day before yesterday, the head of the government of the Russian Federation articulated very important initiatives aiming at protecting businesses against excessive oversight and monitoring. Regulatory guillotine is a very important thing that has been widely discussed recently, and it'll be great if it will be executed, implemented in reality, in real life. And we should not forget that the end beneficiary of oversight and monitoring is still the population. But caring after business, we should also think, we should remember that we protect the values of the citizens, of the population. Talking about the reforms in oversight and monitoring activities. Now we see the refocusing of oversight and monitoring from the indicators of activities and control and oversight activities, switching to real results, the number of violations identified and mitigated, to values, to results that are valuable for the population. And the control and oversight is aiming at minimization of harm and danger that might be incurred against values that are important for the population. And from this point of view, so the first slide, please. From this point of view, so with this, we suggest that we think about how we measure the impact of monitoring and oversight activities over the population, whether the citizens think that this type of activity is useful. And there are indicators that illustrate the successes of oversight and monitoring in minimizing danger for the values. 50% reduction of such harm in various types of risks, 30% reduction of the harm, of the damage. But these indicators do not show us how citizens perceive these things and whether they really feel protected, whether the monitoring and oversight function is really protecting them against the risks mentioned above. And we wanted to show how the population perceives their level of protection of their values. So the same thing was done was done for state and municipal services when they measure the level of satisfaction of the people, and this helped us to improve the indicators of state services in order to ensure better satisfaction among people, starting with such challenging things as reducing the time spent in queues. And the results were quite positive. Can we do the same in oversight and monitoring activities? Actually, there are cases where they try to do measurements like that, and some oversight and monitoring bodies measure how people assess the results of their activities. At the same time, the assessment of this type of activities was done by people who actually addressed these offices with claims against shops or stores or other agents of business, or claims against the oversight and monitoring offices in various cases. But this means that these are not everyone who can benefit from oversight and control. So we realized that for people to be able to assess the effectiveness of control bodies, we should ask questions we should ask not only those who address these offices, but everyone, um, every citizen, because they have to have a certain level of protection for the values that are protected by these offices, control and monitoring offices. That's why we proposed a methodology, and a methodology for sociological polls. So we ask questions to all citizens, and we ask them how they assess the level of protectedness of important, significant values, starting from life and health down to architectural monuments, against the main types of risks, starting with risks entailed by spoiled food products, non-food products, etc., down to risks that create non-sanctioned utilization of private data. There are 10 risks of this type. And we asked people questions. We offered a methodology for this questionnaire and how they assess the level of protectedness in all types of values that are protected against the risks that are relevant for such values. So starting from this, we had our sociological poll, and the main indicators we researched were as follows. Did you face the necessity to protect significant values? We also asked them how they assess the level of protectedness of the important values as satisfactory. Number 3, we asked how they assess the quality of their interaction with oversight and monitoring bodies. And basing on this, we realized that after the poll, the results show that the final criteria of assessment of oversight and monitoring activities should be the following. The lower the need to have the protection, the better the effectiveness of their activity. The more satisfactory the level of protectedness is, the better. The more positive the feedback is, the feedback on the protectedness of the values in question, the better the effectiveness of the oversight and monitoring bodies. So 28 regions across Russia was covered by the poll. and the deviation is quite small. And the results are as follows. The main results are as follows. The level of protectedness. Yes, first of all, I should say that in general, 76% of respondents showed the need to protect significant values. I'll I'll put it in a nutshell. They faced the necessity of protection, not only their own values, but the values important and significant for them. At the same time, the key result is that, in average, only 30% of people assess the level of protectedness across all significant values, across all types of risks, as 30 on the level of 30%. 30% of people think that the level of protectedness is enough. So this is an average figure across all values and types of risks. And as you can see it from the slide, it is different if we go by one. It was not a general question, how do you assess oversight and monitoring activities, but we asked questions about all types of risks. So 30% is an average figure. And as you can see from the slide, the difference is quite large. Sometimes this level is higher. In some other values and risks, so the level is lower. The lowest level of satisfaction is 23.3%. So low quality, poor quality medical drugs and medicines. And I should point this out. The level of protection is much lower than among those who faced the necessity to protect significant values against at least one type of risk, 18.4%. So it means that we have much room for improvement. At the same time, we need to draw our attention to the following. The situation in general coincides with the one we had at the starting point of the administrative reform in 2004-2005 in assessment of satisfaction of people on provisioning of state and municipal services. We highlighted two figures. One source that went to the concept of administrative reform. 14% of people were satisfied with the quality of state services. According to another source, 25% is the figure for some of the types of services. So these figures are quite comparable with what we have today, and that's why we can say that it's time to start a reform aiming at improvement of the level of protectedness of people against various types of risks in the segment of the values significant for the people. We can also see that this assessment is changing dramatically depending on various points, depending on the format people faced or didn't face various types of threats to the significant values. And the highest level of protectedness, 32.7%, are those who never faced a need to be protected against these risks. So it means they didn't face such situations or their friends and relatives. And among those who faced such issues and the violations were identified but were not eliminated after the claims were submitted to the relevant offices. So the level of protectedness, just 16% think that the level of protectedness is enough. So this is also a source of growth for better level of protectedness for people. And finally, the level of protectedness also depends on... Did I do something wrong? So among those who faced the need for better protectedness, we see some figures here. Those who never faced the need to be protected against this risk, the highest level of protectedness is shown among those who face some risks related to work and life conditions and poor quality food products, 38.7%. And the lowest indicator is among those who really had some damage, suffered from some damage through worsening environmental status, 10%, and non-sanctioned dissemination of personal data, 20.2%. So 12.2%. If we compare it against the quality of state and municipal services, the task is the same. We need to increase the indicators to increase the level and the assessment of the level of protectedness in general. Next point. How people assess the changes in the protectedness, in the level of protectedness against the main risks over the recent 2 years. And we see here that across all risks shown here, despite the fact that the reforms were underway at the time, across all risks and threats, people say that the situation with their protectedness is not changing. The comparison again of positive and negative assessments show that the level of protectiveness is going down across all risks. In main risks, 10.4% of people think that the level is higher now, but the rest thinks that the level is going down, is worsening. So across various risks, the situation is different. At the same time, what is important here to make conclusions out of these figures? This picture shows that people do not just use one factor as the main precondition for their level of protectedness. Many people, the majority, thinks that their level of protectedness depends on their own actions. Almost 80%, 50.8% think that their protectedness is depending on the activities of oversight and monitoring offices. So, from one hand, we can think that we should strengthen this function in the country, but at the same time, if we want a better level of protectedness of people, probably we should think about launching other types of mechanisms that can actually complement or substitute this function in the country. So I'd say that the last position is probably more effective, but this is an open question for everyone. And a couple of figures related to the facts of contacts of people with control and oversight offices. So about 30% of people faced the necessity and need to be protected against a risk, but at the same time, people usually go to such offices quite rarely and only if an emergency happens.
8,70 государственный НКО.
So, and you can see from here by the diagram that in some cases, for instance, in relation to ill quality food products, 34.4% of the citizens did confront this necessity to be protected. Only 3.2 really addressed to the authorities for that. Possibly it is related to the fact that the citizens are aware that they will not always get what they want, and among those who did address the authorities, the violations have been eliminated, or the damage was reimbursed as a result of 61.1% of those visits. So the violations have been eliminated. So the damage was reimbursed in 42.8% of cases. And according to the citizens, the material expenses were really high that they incurred. So we also have to take into account that the citizens were not very much aware of the reforms in relation to the supervision activities. Only 29.3% of them were aware, or it did ring a bell to them about this reform. And not many of them really have a good idea of what it is. And possibly it is important also that the population does not expect very much of the reform. 37.3% of them think that only 37.3% of them are sure that the reform will improve the level of their protection. So what kind of conclusions can be drawn? Because we are not, we're not offering to draw the conclusions, but thus we think that that at least will make them reflect on how to better evaluate this position of the citizens, their opinion, in organizing those measures to be improved in supervision and control. We think that in the framework of all those efforts, irrespective of what you call them, reforms or whatever, what you have to do is one of the key indicators of efficiency and effectiveness of supervision and control, and it's been reformed and improvement to review a better evaluation level of by the citizens of the level of protection and the level of their safety by average and by every group of risks. So we should identify it in relation, similar to the public services and the target indicator, and based on the baseline indicators, we should identify the measures to do it. According to our opinion, the following indicators of reforms and improvements should be outlined in the framework of the proposals we've just mentioned. So we might identify the share of the citizens who did evaluate the significance of the protection of the values to be protected, of the risks of damage. In 2018, it was 30%. The target indicator might be 60%, and by each separate group, minimum plus 20% of growth. Plus 20 basic points. The second indicator is the share of citizens who did confront this necessity to be protected, at least from one group, risk groups. In 2018, it was 76.3%, but the target indicator might be 56.3%. To provide the reduction, minimum 15% in each group of risks, and the share of citizens who did evaluate the level of their protection, at least with one groups of risk. In 2018, it was 18. The target indicator was 48 in each group of risks, minimum plus 20%. Should be the growth. I'm not saying for which kind of period, whether it's 3 years or 5-year horizon. That's a question of your resource and how you really want to use this factor of the assessment by citizens of the level of protection as a factor of improved trust of the population to the state in general. I think I would stop at this. Thank you very much. Sorry, maybe I am, as always, was talking too much, and Nadezhda was not interfering me. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope very much that what we are discussing today, we might answer the question as to whether we need a more detailed and differentiated and more straightforward assessment of and evaluation by the citizens when we are really talking about the efficiency and effectiveness of supervision activities. Thank you very much, Vladimir. I suggest to continue the discussion as follows. Now we'll have the feedback about this presentation. And Yuri Tikhomirov, I would request you to give your comments. And if possible, please answer the question. What is the way the citizens can impact their level of protection, and how we can provide this kind of opportunities to them? Well, maybe it's a little bit too philosophical a question for the discussion. Thank you very much. I was enjoying the work Vladimir and his team's doing, and so I am just picking the cherries from the work. But it's even more serious with all the romanticism of Vladimir. I would say that he decided to really take care of our nerves. And I think that it's maybe I would comment in a wider sense of the word. I think that the concept of development of public control is so archaic and clumsy. So I would strengthen it with the recollections I might have only myself. In 1948, the governments of Russia developed a draft law on public control. That was done in the USSR. But the difficulty was it was the total control and the typical control. So then it went over to the Council of Federation, and now you can see we are now at a different stage. And in my perspective, this draft law is far from being perfect, not only legally, but also conceptually. I bought a German book, and I'm very happy that the future, whether there's the future of the democracy. According to the Constitution, it is democratic, but they still spend their effort to protect citizens from themselves or the representatives of the states. That's the control concept. I think that's a democratic concept that's amazing. I think there should be equal partners. If you are controlling an organization, you should help it to improve and be better and efficient, and to a citizen to show his activity. Or not just to deform the legal consciousness of the citizens. Vladimir and his colleagues, Mr. Dobrolubov and others, they identified this problem and this issue because people are afraid and they don't like those controlling authorities. Just remember the old anecdote. You should know how to fix it, but if you have too much of a vanity and you're incompetent and you're trying to make your requirements more stringent, and that's exactly what the citizens confront and what they face in the business or otherwise. So we are confused in lots of different controls with no effective control terms, and the reporting in RANEPA, and well, it suffers with it came up to pathological sizes and volumes. Well, what seems to me that there's some sociological research shows that we should change the role of the citizens in the process, because our citizens are not active enough. Just quote any works of RANEPA or others where people really exercise their right to manage or rule the state. So in our country, we have a very tough regime of centralization, which is growing, and Thus, what deconcentration of authorities disappears, and as well, I'm inspired by my neighbors who say that it's just disappearing, the place where I can express myself. So please furnish the citizens with this opportunity to be protected from control authorities, because there are so many of them, and there are many other proposals that are being prepared now. But I think there should be another facility and different instruments, to be really efficient. And what Vladimir has drawn us as a picture gives us a feeling that a citizen feels difficulties because there's a pressure of the people looming over him, people who do not take care of him, but they are just self-expressing. Sorry for being so long. Thank you very much. I think it's quite a valuable comment that you made, quite goal-setting and determining what we should, where we should go further. That's exactly how we would like to amend the draft law, and we hope that we might be a little bit more successful than previously. Well, I would request to provide your comments, and if possible, please comment on whether it is possible and whether it is needed, really needed, to split or to separate the assessment of the citizens in control groups. Well, there were examples about pharmaceuticals and medical and healthcare and medical services, and the risks where it also depends on the citizens rather than along with the different other means. There were fires mentioned and other hazardous events. How to protect a citizen in a road incident if his rights are not limited. So because we put it only in one diagram. Are we going to separate it or we won't? Good morning, participants, and thank you very much for this opportunity to speak up here. Yuri Tikhomirov started this reflection venue. So when the moderator asks a question, in my perspective, what he wants or she wants to create a corridor for his or her own concept. So I would compete with the concepts first and then revisit the question. And what I would start with is the presentation that was great and impressive and was very right, but it was still not free from impurities. So what the author offers here. He says, let's reform, but in brackets he put improvement of the activities of supervision. Are we going to reform it or improve it? That's the most important question to be posed. But without solving it, we have been trying for a long time to really have a very professional and efficient control facility. Yesterday, there was a big round table in a very small room, but too many people gathered to discuss artificial intelligence. And those who were talking, they were talking about automation, digitalization, and the respected person who did develop this Alice vocal aid. He said that it's just a set of technologies which allow you to use it. If we put a couple of gadgets in your case, you can call it artificial intelligence, and everybody was involved in it, sincerely so, improving artificial intelligence instead of doing some systemic work. And when we started informatization, we furnished everybody with computers and networks, and then we started the automation, because having already it in place, we could start the automation process to collect the data, the data, and then which allowed us to get over to the next stage of digitalization, which will allow us to finally develop a forecast of future moves. Sooner or later, of course, we will come up to real artificial intelligence, which is genuine. It's not just, it's going to be, well, it's not yes or no. It's very different mathematics and scrap. And only then will we be able to talk about genuine artificial intelligence. Same about supervision and control. If we speak about improvement, so there's certain technological contributions and whatever you call it, or platforms. So it's horizontal facilities. It's randomly. It might be even digital control. But if we talk about some forms of control, there's always an opportunity to improve it. Reforming can be performed only when we have achieved in this form the maximum of perfection, and you will have to get over it to another technological level, and that means reforming. So those are two different tasks to perform. And always they should be aiming at, as Vladimir said, be aiming at a human being. If we go back to the presidential assignment package, and if you read it attentively, the president is doing the same. So there are things to be improved, and there are things to be developed or reformed. And this assignment package, there are both ideas and cases. Well, some you have to improve, some just make it sound as common sense, some obsolete or excessive. And there are questions related to development with transforming it over to risk-oriented approach, which is a different technology, a different analytics, a different research, different functions and tasks, more preventive than anything. Well, the respected speaker said, and the majority of us from the Soviet system, it really did have repressive character, and we are talking about threats, risks, and what about positive things? What about some very light things? Because there are really bright sides of it, and we have to develop it. Maybe so far there are very few of them, less than 30, but that's the basis for development of reforming, and that's the way forward to the bright side of it. Of course, cutting the dark sides away, but that's how to go from the white to from the black to the white. That's the number one problem, not only for the citizens but also from the business. They said, okay, let's rate those white and fluffy, and let's press those dark and ugly. So and those are that's the movement to meet everybody halfway. And even such a serious country as Great Britain, 15% of the business is in gray zone. It's drugs, it's prostitution, it's weapons. So they are fighting against it. They are helping them and to develop those good businesses. Well, and when the president has set the task, and the Marine is the veteran of this movement, and at the very beginning I already said that in this country we should live long and be happy. And practically that means that we should have high quality and safe life. And who should provide it? Those who manufacture high quality services and goods. Not only entrepreneurs, but also social facilities. And then the question, and what's security, what's safety, and what's quality? That's the question we don't want to solve. We don't split control over supervision, because supervision is security or safety number one, and that's why we are sort of counting the numbers to how many citizens think themselves being safe in the quality of food products or whatever. Well, there are some good indicators. That means, well, to live long, that means safety. So, for instance, it means that you have to walk, or you don't fall, you are not poisoned, you have good food products, and you are happy. So of course the quality of life should be provided, but how? By control. Control provides the quality of life. Getting back again to the assignment package by the president, there were some assignments related to the change of the quality of food products. For instance, the president said, okay, let's create high quality, not safe food products, but high quality products. That's different. When you eat it, not just you're not poisoned or you're contaminated, but you feel that it is delicious. That's very different in your feeling. And there were working groups who were talking about discussing. They recollected the Soviet state standards with the sausages created by the Mikoyan factory and so on. They were talking about recipes of different products, and that's exactly what they should. We say that the pensioners they vote for quality because they want to buy 100 or 200 grams of something, but of very good quality. Because if you want to live well, you should have it high quality. And for instance, if there's something wrong with your plumbing system, we are summoning a plumber and not an electrician, because those are two different functions. And we are called supervision body and not control, because that's exactly what we are doing. We are, because supervision is prosecution. And so finishing my thought, well, recapping what I would like to say is that we now realize that if we, as Vladimir said, we are going to put the citizens and their interests as number one. I mean, it's the directors of hospitals and factories. Then there's a question: what is the normative base that should be created to service it? And now we know that the government is doing a great job to streamline the existing activities through processing. So that's exactly what I said. You cannot do digitalization without having it all in place first. You have to first supervise it, and the standard. When we do it to get unified indicator, then we can move forward to risk-oriented approach, which is based on the research that will allow you to start really analyze things to understand what's going on. And only after that, we did have this challenge.
No one was talking at that time about digital economy, but now it started, and now we should understand what digital control is all about. We should not lag behind, but if we create regulatory sandboxes for something new, it should contain something new in terms of oversight and control and monitoring integrated into it. So this is the work to be done, aligned on the level of just random control or risk-oriented things. If we want to bring everything into one thing, it won't happen. We won't succeed. But we are analytical center, and we have another analytical center to the left from me. And from this point of view, I'd suggest that we, fans of monitoring, oversight, and control activities and active co-creators of this reform, let's create two platforms. One of them is legal, because legal points are very important. That it will allow us to create the plans for the framework and sectoral laws and code plans, and at the same time to create a content platform, not to lose the content that should be packed by legal instruments into control. So a forum is the one platform, and analytical center under the government is the other platform. So I tried to answer this question, did my best. Just one comment. When we have reforms in brackets improvement, it means just one thing. From our point of view, consideration of taking into consideration the feedback from people and the assessment of their level of protectedness should go within the framework of improvement and reforms. We should not differentiate the two. I mean, I do not agree. I mean, protectedness means pressure. If you want me to criticize your presentation, I think 2 points are important here: protectedness and satisfaction. So protectedness it means having a shield and a sword. So you protect and you fight against bad things. So we should think about those who also see white things and see black things. And we call it development of content. This is the basic foundation, basis for the further improvement. And your presentation is only about assessing and fighting against negative things. But we try to actually develop standards of preventive activities, of prevention. So when people ask for protection, then it means something is bad. Someone is not doing their job. But if they say everything is fine, I'm satisfied, it's a completely different thing. It is management of positive things. But this is dialectics. This is Hegel. Thank you very much. Mikhail, a question to you. You stay in the reform and you balanced the interests of all three beneficiaries, economic agents, the state, and people. And from your perspective, better position of the people can be achieved through worsening the two others' positions, or through better control, we can have a win-win-win situation across all groups of stakeholders. Thank you very much, Nadezhda, esteemed colleagues. I would like to answer the question first and then comment the presentation. So the question is obvious, I guess. We are not alone in this world, and many countries achieve quite low level of administrative pressure and high quality of regulation. At the same time, the level of risks might also be quite low comparing against our jurisdiction. Administrative pressure level is quite high in our country, and the risks are also high. That's why the targets of reforms, the tasks, are aligned in a way to reduce the risks for people and improve the quality of regulation. I would not agree with what Vladimir Nikolaevich says, saying that the reform will not be successful if we do not take into consideration the feedback from people. But our key indicators, effectiveness and performance, first of all, we look at whether the risks go down for people. And over the last year, we never achieved the KPIs we had, but we see some reduction in the number of in mortality rates and scope of trauma cases. These indicators go down, and we carry out quite wide sociological polls. We ask the inspectors, officers, and also businessmen across the country, and we ask them, how do you assess the reform in terms of administrative pressure and quality of regulation? But we do not do polls like Vladimir Nikolaevich and his team. But thank you very much. You look at this problem from a different point of view. We see reduction of risks and people feel it, but how they really perceive the situation, this is a different question. But I would like to start with some short comments, very short comments. I have more questions than answers, though. But first of all, quite high level of unprotectedness that is shown by our people, also among those who do not face any types of risks. Yes, this shows us a general level of distrust towards the state and unprotectedness among people. At the same time, probably from just for the sake of research. Probably it makes more sense to look at the indicators and opinions of people who faced various types of risks and how they feel about it. And I mean, even the methodology of doing business, quite well known. Well, it has a clear-cut goal to ask those who faced and interacted with various procedures. So if we ask them, is it easy for you to run your business or develop a construction site? If you do not do such things, they cannot answer the question. They cannot describe their level of protectedness. At the same time, the level of protectedness, why it is so low? It actually should be higher, but what should we do with that? Policymakers, what should we do? We do not feel the general level of protectedness, but Rospotrebnadzor, Rostechnadzor, Strasnadzor, oversight and monitoring offices, what should they do? This is also a very important question. Next, a question. You have the figure 45% of your respondents had some damages and costs related to oversight offices. Does it mean bribery? So do they have to pay to these bodies to achieve something? What is it all about? Is it a paid service? What is it? Please use the microphone. Thank you. And a general comment. About 30% of people know something or heard about the reform. For me, it is quite high indicator because the reform is mostly about, well, it's hard to explain it and bring it home to ordinary people. When similar polls were done by the administration of the president, the results were much lower across all national projects. But and here I can say that there is some understanding of the process among people. I don't think that 30% is a low figure. And another question for discussion, what is the level of protectedness that is optimal? You say it is 60%, but why 60%? Why not 70%? Why not 80%? Obviously, we need to have a balance, and no one can feel 100% protected if we put an indicator like this. Probably we live in a completely different country, in a totalitarian country. But why these figures? How can we work with them? So let's take just the Fibonacci figures and take the average. So, Vladimir, could you please comment on this, and we will move on. About the last question, it is important that the level of protectedness is growing, but the growth rates are defined by the resources available to ensure such growth. The figure is not as important here. The important thing is that the growth is there, and that the growth rates are satisfactory for people to feel that the process is going on, and the trust towards the state is growing. But if we ask people who do not face situations like that, the task of our function is to have more people who do not face such challenges, for people to feel protected in any situation, and it is more positive. It is a more positive thing, I guess, and I think we need to ask questions. All people, everyone. So thank you very much. Now we move to the next keynote presentation from the Ministry of Economic Development. The prospects for development of elements of system of assessment of performance of oversight and monitoring bodies. Konstantin Dmitrich, please, you're welcome. May I have my presentation on the screen? Good morning, colleagues. I would like to say thank you very much to RANEPA for this opportunity to speak. And Vladimir Nikolaevich, thank you very much for your attention towards this theme. Thank you for your active participation in this dialogue, and we are always happy to have constructive criticism. I do not know whether my presentation is comprehensive enough. I just planned for a short presentation, but I would like to talk about the subject from the point of view of what we have today. What elements of elements for performance and effectiveness management we have today? What we see for the nearest future, and what we will be doing for 6 months, 2019. In a nutshell, I would like to remind you how this theme was developing in 2015 according to the decree of the President, the Minister of Economic Development. We developed the main timeline, the roadmap for elements for performance management. And in 2017, we started implementing these instruments, these areas, within the framework of the control project for reform of oversight bodies. The benchmark, the landmark event is the approval of the standard for maturity of performance management, cover the practice that has been accumulated, and also showing international practices, and show the system of performance management and its elements, main elements. There are 5 of them. Under each element, we have sub-elements. And of course, for assessment, evaluation of the management system, we need infrastructure, data, and the evaluation itself, just to understand where we are in the system, managerial decisions, and adjacent processes that exist in all elements of the reform. HR, talents, risks, they are not directly correlated with the performance, but they go as a separate thing. I will tell you more about these elements step by step. Yes, infrastructure should be created, adequate infrastructure, also accounting and regulation, supervision, methodological support, and talents. Talents should have proper competences. Everyone is talking about this now. Data. Data is relevant for all areas. People discuss it widely at many platforms, and management for performance and effectiveness management, it is important that we provide for inter-offices exchange and accumulation of data, structuring of databases, and also sources of data is also a very important challenge for this whole process. So the evaluation is based on the indicators of effectiveness and performance, inter-office evaluation, and international comparisons should be done to know the status, the current status analysis, and so on. Managerial decisions, that's something we are talking about, and we lack it today from the point of view of the fact that we, after having evaluated the indicators, what should we do next? It should impact the organization of processes. I mean, this data and these indicators. And ideally, we have on the 4th level of maturity, we put the following position. The state regulations should change accordingly. Also, adjacent processes, external communications and budgeting. Without this, you cannot go anywhere. Without this, no motivation, without proper budgeting, without allocating specific money for monitoring and oversight. Now the budget isn't giving money for this, just general expenses of the function, and the HR policy and corporate culture should be structured accordingly. Values of oversight function, mission, and all that. All these things sit in the standard. From our point of view, from our perspective, these are the elements that sit in the standard today, but there are also elements of the system that are covered by the decree of the government 914, and they are quite scarce because this is a decree of the government, not a methodology document. And because of the fact that during the process of development of this document was unclear what elements should go into it, and that's the document. It should not be too detailed about how informatization should go in the future or something else. This is not the type of document that describes all that. But we see that we lack some of the elements. First element, 3 elements altogether, we are going to work with in the coming 6 months. First element is the register of indicators of performance. What does it mean? A year ago, we launched the 788 decree that covered key indicators of performance that show the damage to values protected by the law and some criteria. And now we introduce some additional points to this document. But this is a list of indicators that allowed us to fix the names and the main lines. But the register should not only have the names, but the key indicators, the methodology of calculation, and that's how we ensure control over these indicators and the systematization of them. And we also think about including into the register the regional types of control, those that have already articulated performance indicators in various types of control and developed the methodology. And this is not an Excel or paper register. This is a register in the state system management, and also certification of indicators. So yes, we can work with the names of the indicators, and sometimes we had arguments with various officers about 2 different words. It was too much, but it is just half of the problem. The methodology, to develop a methodology, is very challenging. Where are the sources of data? What are the limitations? That's why in the standard we have the certificate of indicators. We've developed the methodology, and we will fine-tune it soon, and we'll introduce it into the decree of the government in order to have it as an element of a mandatory element for evaluation system, a methodology element, and it can, going together with the register, it'll allow us to be able to properly calculate and what indicators, what they cover. Sometimes they do not cover something because there are not enough sources for it. So this is the whole register linked to the methodology and the key indicators, basic indicators, with for a significant period of time. All these things should sit in the state system. The management, it should be open. And the most important thing is that we have already started this type of work. We've been testing for 6 months, testing the transfer of indicators that are indicative, called indicative, in terms of the audits in types of control. And yes, we have some information on types of control, and it is important that this data goes from information system into управление, the system management, automatically, not to make it a manual process. So for systems to exchange information automatically, and we tried it with Rostrud, Labor and Tax Office, and some others. Also, Rosprotnadzor will join the process, and we will work on sending the key performance indicators into the register. And also a couple of words about the element we need, but we still lack it. the element of evaluation from the point of view of what we will do with these indicators when they are in the register, when we monitor them in the register. We haven't yet understood it clearly from the point of view of management. Yes, we can improve oversight and monitoring, and sometimes we should reform it. That's why we are looking forward to the adoption of a draft law that will allow us to fine-tune the system from the point of view of not inter office management, but how the government assesses, evaluates the activities basing on the system of indicators. Thank you very much, Maria Anatolyevna. Let's move on down to our agenda. So let our speakers present first, and then we'll have a Q&A session. Thank you very much. So this is our I hope, bright future, what you were talking about. So Alexander, as a constant participant of our projects, how do you evaluate today's status? We know that you monitor the situation closely and you carry out the polls. Please share your opinion. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to organizers for this opportunity to speak. So following what Konstantin Dmitrievich was talking about, I would like to tell you a couple of words, as you know, we are still the same sitting on the panel. Probably we should change something because we didn't cover much ground. But what happens now? The task was to analyze the work that was done by the functions in the sphere of performance and effectiveness management indicators, how they work in real life. But what can we say now? We are just at the beginning. I'm happy that we, from a very nice presentation Konstantin has just articulated, we actually integrated into the system the understanding of the importance of these indicators
and what it should be aimed at. And still, it's a very theoretical exercise. And in August, what we did, we were questioning the supervision authorities and based on the normative acts as to the status. And out of the 16 authorities, 9 did participate. Rostechnadzor, Rosprodnadzor, Rosselsхознадзор, and federal tax authorities, they didn't participate because they said they didn't have the decree of the government, and that's why they do not have to do it. So they don't have the Group A indicators, and they're not striving to have some. So as for Rostrans, they and others, they didn't take part in this question, and maybe it is good because we don't know maybe something about their accounting, and there might be some positive and pleasant surprises. So the conclusion is that all the authorities that participated did approve the set of those indicators officially, and the number of authorities even did so in respect to the target indicators and even the indicators per se. So those which are not integrated into the federal authorities indicators, they sort of exist somewhere in midair, and they use Decree 215 for their accounting. So that's why the indicators that exist somewhere in their own form, but that's quite an interesting thing to follow. We still have a system of collection of data, even if in those places where they have passports, well, that's not always very accurate because the way they collect their statistical data. So I think that's the work for another several years to do. Well, I don't say that there's no budgeting, and that's why no staff decisions, and that's why it is not cascaded to those authorities which are still unaware of the process. That is why I would say that that's not integrated in the system of strategic planning, because we looked up a number of state programs with the indicators of somehow related to the supervision and control authorities. They have either very different indicators or the same indicators but with different nominations, or it is either lower but or higher or vice versa. So it's sort of a confusion or whatever you call it. So it seems to me that we still are at the beginning of the way. We are starting to realize how much we have to do. Still, I am a little bit doubtful about the fact that we might lose some important things here, and we have to wait for the law to be adopted. And Konstantin is right. But today we even lost the upper level of the reform indicator. It's the damage to life and health status, and we are conducting the discussions as to how we're going to improve the health thing of the supervision and control authorities, because their upper level of indicators still is not even seen, because we used to live in the project indicators with very clear-cut roadmaps. Well, maybe they didn't have this indicator, but if we don't, we cannot provide those lower indicators until they have the upper nomination. So, well, still we continue being at the beginning of it, and we will move forward. And as for Vladimir's presentation, I think it's a very good and right exercise, and it's useful, and I wouldn't make it an absolute thing. Of course, it is important to request or ask the citizens about their attitude to what's going on and how good they feel being protected or unprotected, but I wouldn't put it into the reform indicators. Indicatively, yes, it is useful to measure from time to time, and I explain you why, because I think it is, well, it might be similar. It's not very correct to see the analogy, but the service is very specific. If you visit authorities, and usually it's the multifunctional center, you address them, you get some results. Well, everybody treats this notion of protection in a very different way. It's mix of very difficult thing, well, concern, well, because of the economic status or situation in the country or region or a family. And if you, and it is very difficult to distance, and thus we are making, drawing the conclusions about the indicators. The quality of medical services and healthcare and the feeling of being protected in healthcare sphere. Well, the Rosneft, according to the standard, it might feel good, but my feeling is that the service was not good. Maybe I didn't take the pill in time, but still my feeling usually depends on the system, and supervision or control body might have nothing to do about it. So I wouldn't, I would treat it sort of carefully, because there are so many outside noises. So if we put it as an absolute term, we will have the situation when the control bodies will be engaged in persuading us that our products are of high quality, our healthcare is of high quality. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it. As an indicative, it is very good, but it should not be an absolute term. Well, still, I am concerned about the lack of indicators of the impact of those authorities on the economic growth, because we are talking about reduction of risks and pressure. But why is their contribution to the implementation of any decrees? Or well, I don't see it, and I think we should do it somehow, because I think it's no less important, and we have to mention it. Thank you. Thank you, Alexander. Unfortunately, we're a little bit beyond our schedule here, so please briefly recap about this opportunity of a breakthrough in the separate regions, maybe some advanced practices as to what Moscow is doing, for us to be able to give an opportunity for the first row to say things. So in Moscow, there are 33 types of regional control. We are the coordinator of this activity in Moscow and are interested in following the following principles to ease the load of the business, transparent control, supporting controllers, and reduction of costs. Those are the principles we are based on, and our focus is aimed at several important things to develop risk-oriented approach, planning, and control measures, improving literacy or competences of the controllers, and that's why the government of Moscow already started the bachelor program and also additional education, which will allow us to improve the controllers' competences and skills. And another block is automation. Everybody's talking about that. We have to understand that without right and good information solutions, it's impossible to build up a smart control or a smart city. That's why we have developed and even launched a system of control and based on the control activity center. And all those authorities are now placed there to, and our main goal is to make this register convenient for all the risks we can see should be placed in one database. And also to make interaction and single accounting or reporting standards very convenient and comfortable. And we are planning personal accounts and for us to be able to evaluate the load and efficiency. And also we have to understand about if the efficiency and effectiveness control. And we are doing it already. And for 2017, we can see that indeed the risk-oriented approach does have its positive side, and we can see improvement of audits level, and the efficiency is growing of those control measures undertaken. So, of course, I can talk a lot, but unfortunately, we are pressed for time. And in conclusion, I would like to say thank you to everybody and say that in my perspective, of course, we have to give more freedom to the regions to build up their development plans for supervision and control based on their peculiarities and specificities, because Moscow is very difficult to be compared to others. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Well, let's adjust the format a little bit. Colleagues, the experts who would like to speak up briefly about the main presentation, or, okay, maybe free microphone. You can grab a microphone, and for me not to, no. Well, please give the microphone and... Well, I would like to ask a question. It's for Konstantin. You know, we at the bottom, we are not even going to criticize what you are doing, because you can see better, because you are the authority as to how to manage the control and supervision. I mean, in the state sort of the word. What we expect from you is only one indicator: reduction of risks. Death rates and damage to health, material damages, and protected values. There's nothing else that we are interested in. That's it. All other indicators we are regularly studying with you are not interesting. I am talking on behalf of a public organization which covers 450,000 of SME businesses, and I cascaded all those things to them. What you were saying, that's the only thing they want from you. Number two, we expect from you, when you start to weigh your requirements in efficiency, when you start studying which requirements violation led to this or that implications. And if a requirement did not lead to any implications or was not violated, should be excluded. And that's what we expect from you, which is going to be the #1 thing in the checklist, because that's the research we need, because the checklists are overloaded today. And the only way, the real way of trading and well, the requirement is not in demand and violation does not lead to any implications. That's the only thing. Now about your presentation. Thank you very much, of course. We always say that the main controller is the consumers, because the consumers are very infantile and very scared and intimidated, because the rare consumers who dare to protect their rights, well, they very often fail. Why so? Because we have to revisit this question that of insurance, of liability. And if it is implemented in the society, the initiative rate of those consumers will grow digitally, because they will thus realize that they can be very effective in protecting their rights, and not to come up to some point and then the person disappears, those in charge, and on the way the process will be dragged and he will be helped out. So our consumers are not protected from the very beginning. Big number of organizations which speak on behalf of consumers to protect them actually are not effective controllers, and very often they protect the rights of their own purse. Pockets. So for us, it's very important in the course of this reform to raise this issue of insurance of liability, which will allow us to reduce a lot of other expenses, much more expensive than this kind of insurance. In the interests of consumers, we are made declaring, counting, accounting, reporting, and this can all be reduced and eliminated with introduction of this insurance facility. And then the consumers will realize that to protect his rights would be possible, and he will thus be furnished with a competence. Why don't we have so many audits in other countries? Because the consumers are insured. And he himself can protect their rights. No officials, no executive will protect effectively the rights of consumers, because he's not just interested; he has other interests to care for. So, irrespective of how good a citizen he is, because it's not his life interest. Thank you very much. Well, I would like very briefly to say about citizens. Well, I mean, which is still deaf, blind, and that's very good that this example was used. Well, I wanted to draw attention to the unions of citizens, and they might be very active, not only consumers, but not only in the 10 areas that you've outlined. So you have to, I think we have to take into account the qualities that would facilitate the modernization and those which prevent it. Well, those that facilitate, of course, those presenting the external mechanism. And we have to review the ties between all those things, interdepartmental control, to provide feedback and reduce the expenses for citizens who would like to address an authority. And very important thing is that they identify or build up a zone of autonomous zone, which is excessive. One of the elements is of the accounting of where to go, and then such factors as geographical scattering and very low or very weak negotiation positions and very low resource base. And it so happens that citizens can be based on the convention that the society society has. And I should say that the media picture would be very important, and PR would be. Usually they say that the most important thing is the punishment, and that's why everybody wants everyone to be punished, shot because of fires or misdeeds. And besides, it's not clear for the citizens why you should get involved on all those mechanisms if the result is not clear. And first of all, you have to come up to the number one person to punish someone. So I think we should strengthen this type of signal that the citizens should realize as to what the way is, that the punishment is not a real impetus to change the behavior. And importantly, they can be based on their own experience if they could see the results of the change of control in the unions or associations of citizens. And we have issues here because here the control and supervision is becoming even higher. And for instance, in September, the law of the Ministry of Justice instructed the organizations to report whether they were donated some money or borrowed money from companies that might have some foreign agents, and so they should declare declare whether they have foreign money involved or whether it is a violation of their commercial secrets. That's exactly the sphere that I can quote you a lot of examples where the control facilities and activities are cascaded from the regulated down to those who are controlled. And the citizens associations have no options to actively participate because their own control is deteriorated and from the point of view of an understanding of the concept. So my proposal is to revisit the negotiation status of the citizens associations in those 10 spheres. And there are so many of it. And why it is declared for December 26th. And the second thing is to include supervision and control into the total system of reforms for us to have positive motivation. Thank you very much. That was Svetlana Makovetskaya. Okay, that's Svetlana Makovetskaya, Director, Center of Studies, Civil Studies. That's very interesting. That's the way we should go. Colleagues, please grab the microphone. Nadezhda. Good morning, and thank you very much for this opportunity. Vladimir made me reflect on a very different thing. Well, I had read your presentation before you made it. So me as an expert, usually I speak on behalf of the state. And being the general director of a company which is engaged in expert analysis, I can also speak up on behalf of the business. And sometimes I can see that I can be penalized from time to time, that even I didn't suspect about this thing. But in this case, I reviewed it and treated it from the point of view of a citizen and was upset a little bit because I'm a Muscovite, and Muscovites are in a better position. I mean, thanks to those colleagues here, because there are so many mechanisms of feedback that you can somehow use. And the Moscow experience is special, of course. And if you had some research, that would be great. I started to think as to what I would need. And as for protection, I would, well, it's very difficult to answer, I doubt. But as a citizen, I'm not interested in the damage or level or measure of liability. I'm interested in my environment, as how safe the facilities and enterprises are those I'm interacting, but I'm not furnished, I'm not provided this information, and I have to somehow address those facilities. Citizens are making up their ratings, and we use them, but we have to realize they're very subjective. Why I am not provided the information? Well, my hypothesis is that no one even thinks that citizens might need some information, and you quoted some 70% as a number that the citizens themselves themselves should evaluate the risks and make the decisions as to how to get rid of different negative things. I was very happy about that because everybody is sort of infantile and, well, of course, but first we need information. And they don't believe the state. That's number two. So the information, I'm not given the information. And if you look up the website of a territorial control body, that's something in itself. So our manager went there, and he was well received there, and he made a great presentation. Sometimes there's information about that someone wanted to poison you, but we saved you all. How to buy shoes, how to select champagne for the new year, how to survive if it is not champagne that you're drinking for your New Year party. Very interesting information, very curious. So what, as a citizen, I would like to have? I would like to have an idea. I have several polyclinics in my district, so provide me with a rating. But nothing of the kind. There's some objective reason why not. We looked up the Great Britain experience, very detailed, and I'm a physician by my profession, and so this health situation is very close to my understanding. On the website of an organization which is similar to our Roszdravnadzor, all acts of audits, they all are placed there with all the details, a very big document with every details there. But there are criteria. They assess quality and safety. It's like a street light. It's green, red, yellow. So for me to understand whether I should relocate or run away from this place I live in. So this is the information for me to make the decision. So this organization, for instance, it evaluates the indicators which are very similar to ours. But we have 6 organizations to evaluate the same indicators. Minzdrav, then Roszdravnadzor, Rospotrebnadzor, FMA, Rostrud, and Rosprodnadzor. That's as a minimum. Maybe someone else does too. Even thus I will not have a genuine picture. It might happen sometime, but not now. So, and number 3, I wanted to draw your attention to is that the state, me as a citizen, never asks me as to what kind of requirements are important for me of those values protected. Which are the priorities? Because I think that maybe we should discuss it. And the last example is Roszdravnadzor, which decided to ban the school to bring food to school. They are not now allowed to bring in their own food from home to school, but the risks that would stay hungry because of because, for instance, if a child does not want to eat what the school can offer. So those decisions which lead to implications and risks for the citizens, I think that's a very bad thing. And the citizens looking at Moscow are well self-organized, and they find the normative information of the requirements. They, for instance, can take the decree of the government as to and then they take a knife and cut the parcels, and they can do whatever.
And I think this process will move on somehow, but we need to take into consideration our people anyway. Thank you very much. Thank you. And let's give the floor to Oleg Alexandrov about the functions and responsibilities with what it all had to be started. So we've been talking for quite a period of time about it now, and getting back to the beginning of this forum when they articulated the regulatory reform, how we can execute the regulatory guillotine. Yes, we would like to say a couple of words about this. We're pressed of time, but guillotine and the authorities. The requirements, there are more than 2 million requirements now. To analyze 2 million requirements in a year, it is just impossible. Moratorium, no one is offering moratorium for these mandatory requirements. But let's start with the audit of responsibilities, rights and responsibilities the oversight function has, and look at them from the point of view of their legal status, effectiveness of implementation of and execution of these rights and responsibilities, and also look at the excessiveness of the norms and the regulations within the framework. Because if we just eliminate mandatory requirements, but the authorities stay, it means that after a year after you eliminate them, they will come out again, because the rights and responsibilities will stay in the function. And we need to start with assessment evaluation of these responsibilities, and then we should go to digitalization of the rest. And digitalization is the last stage of the reform for oversight function, because with this we should finish our process, not start with digitalization. Thank you. Thank you very much, Oleg Alexandrovich. So we need to finish our panel. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much for your discussion. This is a very important subject indeed. And thank you very much to the moderator. Thank you, colleagues.